Good afternoon. This is Lynne Jones, and I'm coming from Santa Cruz, California. And I have the great pleasure of introducing to you Dr. Hanna Kahleova, who is, I could actually say, Doctor, because she has not only her MD, but a PhD in research. And I think that this makes her particularly qualified to have the position of Director of Clinical Research at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. This committee is dear to my heart because 10 years ago, I had terrible neuropathy in my feet. And it turns out that I was very high in being pre-diabetic. I had been vegetarian for 2 years, and I switched off after listening to the research from Dr. Barnard to taking away dairy and eggs. And within 3 months, my numbers went down considerably. And you can see that information. There's something in the chat room that will lead you to my whole story. But today is really about Dr. Kahleova. She's going to be speaking about her diet in the treatment of diabetes. And she has published many studies, over 12, on nutrition and related to this kind of problem. And she is now speaking to us from Washington, D.C. at the office of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And I wanted to get right to her because she has lots of important things to share with us.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction. Wow, what a story. You can actually reverse diabetes or pre-diabetes, right? Like you can get your numbers down with a plant-based diet. And we'll be, looking into this topic in a little bit more detail. Like, how is it possible that a vegan diet works so well for people with diabetes and also as a prevention of diabetes? So let me share my screen and let's get started. These are the beta cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. And it's been thought that, by the time people are diagnosed with diabetes, about 50% of the beta cells are gone. And it's been thought that it would be like an irreversible process. But I want to share with you some really exciting findings that, from a study that we performed at the Physicians Committee, suggesting that this process may actually be reversible. So that's like a small teaser. We'll come back to that theme, hold that thought. And let's start with the state of our healthcare. The United States is the highest healthcare spender in the world. Can you believe it? The US spends 50% more on healthcare than other high spenders like Sweden or France. Well, if we spend so much money on healthcare, does it translate into, better outcomes for people with diabetes? How about diabetes prevalence? Like, how many people get diabetes? Well, you can see that in the US, twice as many people have diabetes compared with Sweden, let's say. So the money invested in healthcare doesn't really translate into lower numbers of diabetes. What about if you already have diabetes? What about your complications? Are they lower in the US as a result of the high healthcare spending? Well, look at this. 5 times higher rates of lower extremity amputations in the US compared with Sweden. Okay, what about cardiovascular mortality, which is the #1 killer for people with diabetes? And again, the outcomes are not so great in the US, 3 times higher compared with France or Japan. So, in other words, all the money spent on healthcare is not able to compensate for the unhealthy foods that we're eating in the United States. And that's just the reality. 3 out of 4 men and 2 out of 3 women in the United States are overweight or obese. So can a plant-based diet help with this obesity epidemic and also the diabetes epidemic? The Adventist Health Study 2, which takes a health conscious population here in the US, the Seventh-day Adventists who don't smoke, don't drink alcohol, and are health conscious. So they're a great study group. And the Adventist Health Study 2 demonstrated a linear relationship between the animal product consumption and the body mass index. The body mass index being the lowest among vegans. And as people start introducing animal products into their diet, notice that when you include dairy and eggs, then the average body mass index is more than 2 points higher compared with vegans. And then we have pesco-vegetarians who also include fish, so their BMI is even higher, and semi-vegetarians who eat meat only time to time, and non-vegetarians who still consume meat, even though in the Adventist cohort, the meat consumption, even among meat eaters, was lower compared with general population in the US. We see the vast difference in the body mass index. 5-point difference. Look at that. Wow. Okay, what if we look at the numbers of diabetes? We see the same, a linear trend. The more animal products you consume, the higher your chance of having diabetes. So the prevalence of diabetes among vegans is only 2.1%, compared with 7.6% among the non-vegetarians. Wow. Okay, how can you explain this? So these are observational studies that only ask people what they eat and look at the numbers. So what if we take a vegan diet and use it as a treatment? What if people are overweight? Can we use a vegan diet for weight loss? So in one study like this, taking a vegan diet for 14 weeks, these participants lost about 13 pounds on average, and they lost about 2 inches around their waistline, which made gene shopping more enjoyable. Now, the question is, why is that? Why does a vegan diet help with weight loss, even compared with diets with the same amount of calories? So it's beyond caloric intake. Number one, energy density. We know that, for example, vegetables that have a low energy density, they fill your stomach up with very few calories, compared with meat in the middle and then oil on the left. Fiber is another part of the explanation. Fiber is this magic that works throughout the gastrointestinal system and fills us up, plays a major role in satiety and satiation, energy balance, and weight regulation. The vegan diet also promotes a healthy gut microbiome. The food that we enjoy in terms of taste, the gut bacteria enjoy in terms of the outcomes. They feed on the fiber that's contained, and as a result, the gut microbiome is more diverse. There are more kinds of bacteria. So, for example, people living in Africa have a more diverse gut microbiome because of all the plant foods that they're eating compared with Western countries. And the gut microbiome diversity is able to explain about 8% of the blood viscosity, or how well the blood is flowing through your arteries. So it's really important for your heart health as well. But it's not only about how many kinds of bacteria you have in your gut, it's also about which kinds of bacteria you have. One study compared children living in rural Africa in Burkina Faso to children living in Italy. And you can see that their gut microbiome was completely different. Children living in rural Africa had more Prevotella, and more Bacteroidetes, which are the anti-inflammatory bacteria, compared with children living in Italy who had more Firmicutes, here in red. And these are bacteria that promote inflammation. So a vast difference between children living in Africa and children living in Italy. And this particular ratio between Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes can explain about 22% of your cardiorespiratory fitness. So when you lace up your sneakers and when you hit the trail, or when you step on your treadmill, we can predict about 22% of your performance from just your gut microbiome composition. That means we need to take care of our gut microbiome. We need to feed our gut microbiome. Many people think that probiotics, the bacteria that you consume in fermented foods such as kombucha or sauerkraut, are beneficial, and short term it can help. But it's more important to consume a lot of prebiotics, which is the food our gut bacteria feed on. And the highest amounts of these prebiotics is in onions and garlic and whole grains. And so make sure that you eat plenty of these. Our gut is not only important for the gut microbiome composition, but it also plays other functions. One example is that when we ingest food, hormones that are called the incretins are secreted in the small intestine, and they have multiple functions. They promote satiety, and they also stimulate insulin. And people with type 2 diabetes have a diminished incretin effect, which is the difference in insulin secretion after an IV glucose infusion and the same amount of glucose that you drink in a water solution. So people with type 2 diabetes have a diminished incretin secretion compared with healthy people, which translate into higher glucose levels. And now the diminished incretin effect is also leads to the development of diabetes, but it's also vice versa. When you have diabetes, this further diminishes your incretin effect. Is there any way out? Could we just break this cycle using a vegan diet? We know that saturated fat in animal products impairs the incretin signaling in beta cells that produce insulin. So what if we used a vegan diet? Could that be the magic for incretin secretion? To answer that question, my former PhD student, Lenka Belinova, she brought in 50 people with type 2 diabetes to our lab, and we looked at their incretin secretion after 2 standard meals, one vegan sandwich and one meat-containing sandwich with the same amount of energy. And what we found out was really fascinating. As expected, after the meat-containing sandwich, the line, for the incretin secretion was kind of flat, like no big difference. But look at the vegan meal. We saw a nice peak in both studied incretins, GLP-1 and GIP. And the effect was comparable to sitagliptin, which is one of the medications that has been specifically developed to treat this condition. So yay, one single meal that's plant-based, that's vegan, can actually work the magic. And since we eat many meals during our life, potentially when you add one meal after another, it's like taking a medication for diabetes. Now let's move on to can a plant-based diet actually boost your metabolism? Many people complain, when I was in my 20s, I was able to eat anything I wanted without gaining weight. But now that I'm in my 40s and 50s, look at that. I seem to be gaining weight from just breathing air. And that struggle is real for many people. But I have some encouraging news for you. You don't only have white fat around your belly, but you also have brown fat. Have you heard that newborns, when they're born, the newborn babies, they have brown fat to help them regulate their temperature, to help them with thermoregulation? It turns out that the brown fat still exists in adults as well, particularly in the neck area and around the spine. And what does the brown fat do? Instead of storing the energy like the white fat does, the brown fat has uncoupling proteins that help release the extra energy in the form of heat. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we ate anything we wanted and we would just burn the extra energy in the form of heat? And that's exactly what we can do, actually. So when you look under the microscope, this is white fat that you have on your belly. This is brown fat, which is much more pink because of the mitochondria. It's much more active. Now, can plant foods actually activate brown fat to make us thinner? And the answer is yes. So here are some foods that can activate brown fat: hot peppers, jalapeno peppers. But for those of you who don't like spicy foods, I have some good news. It's also the amino acid L-arginine, which is contained in soy foods, beans, and nuts and seeds. So stock up on beans and soy and eat some nuts and seeds, and you will automatically stimulate your brown fat. Turning up the heat has been suggested as a way of preventing and treating diabetes, because after each meal, this is breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the energy expenditure goes up, which is called the thermic effect of food. So it's not only about how many calories you're eating, but also about how many calories you're burning after the meal. You know that especially when it's chilly outside, you eat a meal and you warm up, and it's so nice. So this is because of the thermic effect of food. But different foods have different thermic effect of food. And it turns out if you eat a sandwich with white bread, the thermic effect of food will be lower compared with whole grain bread. And so what will happen if we eat a vegan diet? It turns out that there's a 16% increase in the thermic effect of food on a vegan diet. And we know that diabetes is on the rise in the United States. But what is the culprit? Is it the sugar? It's all over the news. Like, you know, sugar could be fundamental cause of obesity and diabetes epidemics. Other people say the toxic truth about sugar: fructose, pure, white, and deadly. Is it a health hazard? Well, let's look at what the science says. We know that consuming sugar-sweetened beverages increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 18% or by 13% when adjusted for adiposity. But what is it about the sugar-sweetened beverages that increases the risk of diabetes? Is it the sugar itself? Is it fructose because of the use of high fructose corn syrup? Or is it the extra calories that we're consuming? So I'd like you to vote now. Please put it in the chat. If you think, you have three options here. What is it about the sugar-sweetened beverages that increases the risk of type 2 diabetes? Is it the sugar? Is it the fructose in the high fructose corn syrup? Or is it the extra calories? So please put it in the chat. How many of you think it's the sugar? Put it in the chat, sugar. I have some news for you. A meta-analysis from the Canadian researchers showed that sugar consumption was actually protective. People who ate the most sugar had an 11% lower risk of diabetes compared with those who ate almost no sugar. So it's not the sugar. Okay. What about using a high fructose corn syrup? How many of you think it's the fructose in the sugar sweetened beverages? Put fructose in the chat box. The meta-analysis showed that it was completely neutral. If you exchange calories for calories, there is no difference, and fructose is not harmful. So it's not the fructose. Is it the total carbohydrates? It's not the total carbohydrates either. They tend to be on the protective side. So it's the extra calories. When you drink that much sugar in the sugar-sweetened beverages, you usually do it between the meals. And so you basically add more calories to your diet. And the sugar consumed in a liquid form is less satiating than consuming sugar in desserts. Plus, drinking sugar-sweetened beverages is also a proxy for an overall unhealthy lifestyle. People who drink a lot of sugar-sweetened beverages tend to eat more at fast food restaurants. They tend to be less physically active and smoke more and other unhealthy behaviors. The American Diabetes Association provides their standards of care. And as of now, they promote carbohydrate counting as a way to control diabetes. But if people start counting their carbs, if they're cutting down on their beans and pasta and bread and rice, what are they mostly left up with? Well, they're mostly left up with meat and dairy and eggs, right? Does this look like a solution to our diabetes epidemic? No, I don't think so. Particularly when we know that the low carbohydrate diets, when people count their carbs and they eat more fat, they die sooner. The all-cause mortality was 31% higher on the low-carb diets compared with people eating high-carbohydrate diets. Why did these people die on low-carb diets? Because of heart disease and because of cancer. So if you want to die sooner and painfully, then by all means do a low-carb diet. But if not, I have something better for you. One more question. Many people start consuming a low carbohydrate diet in order to prevent diabetes. They are afraid that sugar and carbohydrates in general would increase their risk of diabetes. But is it true? In the health professionals follow-up study, that studied more than 40,000 men, and the follow-up was 20 years. They found out that the diabetes risk was 37% higher on the low carbohydrate diet. So why would you even do that? When you have other options. Don't do a low carb diet. Do a whole food plant-based diet for diabetes. What happens when you transition to a low-fat vegan diet? Let's look at the Adventist Health Study again. The risk of developing diabetes among vegans is less than 3%, compared with over 7% in non-vegetarians. Now, Dr. Barnard was the first one who did an interventional trial in people with type 2 diabetes using a low-fat vegan diet, compared with the portion-controlled and carbohydrate-counting ADA diet, which is in red. And here's the A1C change. A1C is a marker of glycemic control. And the lower, the better for people with type 2 diabetes. So here's how they started. And on the portion-controlled ADA diet, the A1C improved a bit. But look at the vegan diet, that helped much more. So why is it that a vegan diet could help with diabetes? Let's look at the mechanisms. Oxidative stress is one of the key mechanisms behind type 2 diabetes and also behind developing other chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease and cancer. So, in an ideal scenario, the free radical formation is counterbalanced with antioxidants. Unfortunately, in people with type 2 diabetes, the free radical formation outweighs the antioxidants, which leads to oxidative damage. So, since oxidative stress is such an important mechanism behind type 2 diabetes and the development of diabetic complications, would a vegan diet be the magic for oxidative stress? To answer that question, we invited 74 people with type 2 diabetes, and half of them was assigned to follow a plant-based diet, and half of them to do the portion-controlled carbohydrate-counting diet. And the difference between the groups just blew me away. Look at this. You would kind of expect that vitamin C would be higher on a plant-based diet. But look at the difference between the groups, just vast. But what was even more striking was the difference in superoxidismutase and glutathione, reduced glutathione. These are enzymes that our body produces in order to get rid of the free radicals and counterbalance the oxidative stress. So that means that the oxidative stress improved significantly on the plant-based diet, not only by providing the antioxidants through the foods, but also by stimulating the body's ability to produce the enzymes that counteract the oxidative stress. So yes, a plant-based diet worked as magic for oxidative stress. Moving on to another mechanism why vegan diets work so well for diabetes. You are what you eat. And let's take it literally now in terms of the quality of fat that you're eating. The fat that you eat will become an integral part of your cell membranes. You may recall from biology class, this is a phospholipid bilayer. This is the membrane on each of your cells. And lipids or fat is one of the components. So the fat you eat just becomes a part of the cell membranes. Now, the fat contained in plant foods, such as polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, makes the cell membranes more flexible. But the saturated fat contained mainly in animal foods makes it more rigid. And if your cell membrane is more rigid, if you're eating a lot of saturated fat, that's the underlying cause for insulin resistance. Your insulin receptor will not be able to work that well, and glucose will not be able to get inside the cells. And we know that diabetes has a specific signature on each cell membrane. There is a high proportion of palmitic acid, which is one of the saturated fatty acids found in animal foods, and a low concentration of linoleic acid, which is one of the polyunsaturated fatty acids found in plant foods. So what if we don't eat any animal products? What if we eat only plants? What will happen? And the answer is, believe it or not, but you can actually completely rewrite the diabetes signature. You can increase the linoleic acid proportion in the cell membrane. And this was also associated with improved insulin sensitivity and reduced visceral fat. So the plant-based diet worked as a magic eraser on the diabetic signature. Wow, what a magic. Are you getting excited about all the magic that a plant-based diet can do for people with diabetes? Like, are you tracking with me? Like, we're not talking about just weight loss or just gut microbiome. We're just tackling all the underlying causes, and we're tackling our metabolism and the gut microbiome composition and the composition of your cell membranes and the oxidative stress. Wow, what a magic. Now, let me share one more exciting things, what a plant-based diet can do for you if you already have diabetes, or if you're headed in that direction, or you or your loved ones. You know, some of the consequences are pretty irreversible in life, right? But in skillful hands, even a hopeless cause may be saved sometimes. And so when people are gaining weight, and this just places a huge demand on their insulin producing beta cells in the pancreas. The pancreas needs to work overtime to compensate for the insulin resistance, and it just produces more insulin and more insulin. And by the time type 2 diabetes is diagnosed, about 50% of the beta cells are gone. And it gets even worse. You know, it's a huge pharma industry quest. Like, which medication will at least slow down the decline in beta cell function? And it turns out that no matter which medication you choose, the beta cell function in people with type 2 diabetes just keeps declining over time. So our question was, can diet help? Can a vegan diet help? Well, to answer that question, we took people who were overweight, whose BMI was between 28 and 40. They didn't have diabetes yet, because when you don't have diabetes, you have a better capacity to preserve the beta cell function. So that's why we took people who didn't have diabetes just yet, but were headed in that direction. And we randomly assigned them to follow either a low-fat vegan diet or stay on their usual diet for 16 weeks. We had 75 people. The mean age was 53 years. Most of the participants were female, and the mean body mass index was 33. Now, the diet that the participants were following for 16 weeks was a low-fat vegan diet. That means eating fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes. And the control group stayed on their usual diet for 16 weeks. And we measured their beta cell function after a standard meal test. And what we found out was really fascinating. Physical activity didn't change in either group. We instructed all the participants to keep their physical activity constant, and they did. The energy intake decreased slightly in both groups with no difference between the groups. So definitely there was no difference in calories. The control group didn't change their macronutrient intake any significantly. But on the vegan diet, the carbohydrate intake increased significantly and the fat content decreased. Now, people lost significant amount of weight on the vegan diet, 14 pounds in 16 weeks on average. That's almost a pound a week, compared with no change on the control group, in the control group, which is great. But what about body composition? How did body composition change? Well, it turns out that most of the weight loss, almost 10 pounds from the weight loss, was due to fat loss on the vegan diet. People also lost a significant amount of visceral fat. That's the fat around the inner organs. That's most metabolically dangerous. Insulin resistance dropped significantly on the vegan diet. And what was really striking was that the beta cell function improved on the vegan diet. This is the insulin secretion as a function of plasma glucose levels. And you know that people usually, as they're heading toward developing diabetes, as their insulin resistance with the weight gain and with the insulin resistance, they struggle with keeping up with all the demands of, for the plasma glucose in terms of insulin secretion. So no significant change in the control group. But now look at the baseline for the vegan group and look at the nice increase in insulin secretion in all time points at 16 weeks for the vegan group. So yay, a vegan diet was able to not only slow down the decline of beta cell function, but it was actually able to improve the beta cell function. And there was only a moderate association with weight loss. So weight loss was not able to explain everything. So just to give you an analogy, when people are gaining weight, and which is like a whip for the beta cells to produce more insulin, it's like going to the gym and you're tired and you just push yourself to do more and more, but there's only so much you can do. And some people just push themselves with unhealthy foods, and they feel like, let me eat more sugar so that I have more energy, and let me drink some coffee or sodas. But guess what? When you're tired, there's not much you can achieve. It's much more effective to take a rest when you're tired, and that's exactly what the healthy vegan diet does for the beta cells, because the vegetables are super low in carbohydrate, they're rich in fiber, and they provide some rest for the beta cells. But the vegan diet also provides the healthy carbohydrates with enough fiber that slows down the carbohydrate absorption, which is like a regular workout for the beta cells. So the beta cells get the rest they need, they also get regular workout, and they get ripped as a result. So if your beta cell function can improve, there is nothing a vegan diet could not do for you. So I'd like to encourage all of you to help people in their transition toward a plant-based diet. And as you probably know from your own experience, the journey is sometimes scary. It's a bit challenging. It feels impossible at times, but it's doable and it's worth it, because as we looked at the mechanisms that are behind diabetes, a healthy plant-based diet can improve the composition of the gut microbiome. It improves the oxidative stress. It provides the antioxidants, but also stimulates our body's ability to produce the enzymes that help with oxidative stress. It boosts metabolism, so it helps with weight regulation. It also improves the incretin secretion, which further helps with weight loss and with diabetes and glycemic management. And it even improves the beta cell function. So feed your beta cells well with all the healthy foods. And I'm ready to take your questions.
Wow. There's no doubt what we're supposed to do. Eat plant-based.
But now you have the reasons why. Maybe some people may be wondering, well, should I do the vegan diet or should I not? I'm not that sick. My diabetes is still like, the numbers are okay. But hey, if you can get all these benefits from a plant-based diet, what's stopping you? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, that part about the beta cells getting better. We're hearing so much about type 1, then type 1.5, and type 2. So type 2, it's, you've got some beta cells working. Is that right? And
that's right. Yeah.
In type 1.5, it's beginning to damage it. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And type 1 diabetes is a condition where it's an autoimmune disease where the body starts attacking the beta cells that are producing insulin. And that's why people with type 1 diabetes have not enough insulin, and they need to inject insulin. And, could a plant-based diet actually help these people as well? Let me tell you that we published 2 case studies of people who transitioned to a plant-based diet, and their type 1 diabetes improved significantly on a plant-based diet. Their insulin requirements went down, so they needed less insulin. And but it's not only about blood sugar control. As mentioned, cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer for people with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. So for these people, their cholesterol went down, they lost some weight, all their cardiometabolic health improved significantly. And that inspired us at the Physicians Committee to perform a randomized clinical trial using a plant-based diet for people with type 1 diabetes. And this is a topic that we need to cover, next time, because the findings are just under review in a peer-reviewed medical journal. So I cannot wait to share the findings with you, but another time.
And so let me be sure I'm right, though, because 1.5, that means those beta cells are starting to not function as well. And if they change to plant-based, then you can actually stop that decline and improvement. Is that right?
That's exactly right. There are 2 main mechanisms involved in all types of diabetes, and that's insulin resistance and beta cell function. Or beta cell failure, beta cell dysfunction, I should say. And so a plant-based diet can definitely improve your insulin sensitivity. And by doing just that, it helps the beta cells keep up with the demand, for insulin. But our study demonstrated that you can actually improve the beta cell function over time. So, but this approach needs to be also tested in the population with people with type 1 diabetes and, type 1.5 and all types. We had a population that didn't have diabetes yet, so their ability to adapt and their ability to preserve the beta cell function was bigger than in people who already have diabetes. But in any case, this is really encouraging because there is no medication that can do this. That's only the power of plants.
We did have a question from Wilma, and then Debbie, I know you've got a question too. You've been saving. She had asked us about omega-3 ideas, what foods, and several people said some things in the chat. But is there anything you could add about that? How to have more omega-3 in our diet?
This is a great question. Omega-3s and omega-6s, it's about the ratio. So when you cut down on your overall fat content in the diet, when you keep your oils low, then automatically you are consuming less of the omega-6s, and a high concentration of the omega-3s is, for example, in green leafy vegetables. We don't think about these foods as the source of omega-3s, but it's a good source. They have like high quality omega-3s. So if you keep your oils low, the oils are those that are rich in omega-6s. So it's not about, when I'm eating so much omega-6s, how can I add even more omega-3s? It's actually reducing your intake of omega-6s through the oils, keep your oil intake low, and then the omega-3s will proportionately be higher in your intake. And excellent sources of omega-3s are, for example, walnuts. It's also flaxseed. So there's quite some good sources. But even if you don't focus on the omega-3s in your diet, and if you just keep the oils low, you will get so many omega-3s through the leafy greens, for example.
Debbie, you had a question.
Actually, I have a list of questions.
Okay.
So I don't think I have that much time, but you were talking about the hormones that promote satiety. And recently there have been some drugs that have been released that are mimicking those hormones. Can you talk a little bit about the GLP-1s? What you see or what you would recommend for people who are considering that?
That's a wonderful question. We only touched on that a plant-based diet is actually able to stimulate the GLP-1 secretion. So you can get the boost in GLP-1. That's your injection of GLP-1. Instead of, having to do an injection, you can just eat enjoyable meal, and you can do it in a natural way. So what if you're overweight, and what if you're considering the GLP-1 analogs such as Wegovy, semaglutide? Well, we know that they work, that people do lose weight on them, but there are also some downsides. Number one, some people don't really tolerate them. There are some gastrointestinal issues. Some people have nausea. Some people even start vomiting. They do reduce appetite, but they also have some significant side effects. A higher risk of thyroid cancer is number one. Some of the side effects can be life-threatening. For example, pancreatitis. I was on duty at ICU one afternoon, and the ambulance brought in a lady who was on these GLP-1 analogs, and she developed acute pancreatitis, and I thought she would not survive. fortunately, everything went well. And after a few weeks in the hospital, she was released, and yeah, all went well. But I was really deeply concerned about her life. So you start, you're like, oh, I'd like to lose some weight. And guess what? Everybody thinks they will not develop all the side effects, but you never know, like if it's gonna be you who develops these really life-threatening side effects. So that's the side effects is number one consideration. Number two, they're pricey. Like we're talking about $1,500 a month for Wegovy. I mean, for $1,500 a month, just imagine how many groceries you can get. You can get a gym membership. You can get a personal trainer probably. Just imagine what else you could do with $1,500 a month, So the price is another consideration. And number three, will you be able to do injections for a long period of time? Most people cannot do this for longer than a year or so. And studies show then that once they get off these medications, of course, they regain the weight fairly quickly. So you need a long-term plan. These injections seem attractive because they give you the results quickly without much effort. But yeah, it's not a long-term plan anyway. You will need to work on your lifestyle no matter what, even if you start these medications. So why not start right away?
So let me ask real fast. If you are on these medications, do you think it's going to reduce your overall, long-term satiety ability, or, that you would be so dependent on the drugs to have satiety that you may not be able to create that on your own once you get off those drugs?
These medications do reduce appetite, and so, but only as long as you're on them. So once you get off of them, your appetite will rebound, and then here we go again. There's no escape from changing your diet. You need to do it no matter what. So just do it right away without the injections. Don't even bother. Do the work right away, because it'll haunt you along the way anyway.
Okay. Tom has a question, and he says, can you recommend a resource for a simple, comprehensive, and tasty plant-based diet?
Absolutely. I bet that you can provide many resources. If you go to our website, pcrm.org, there's plenty of recipes. You can download our free Kickstart, vegan Kickstart. It's a 3-week program. It's free. It provides you, with the meal plan that you're asking for. And I bet, Debbie, you can recommend plenty of other resources.
Well, I'm actually going to be talking about a class that I'm going to have on November 21st, and it's a Food for Life, and it's specific for diabetes. So I'll be announcing that afterwards. So one more question, and that's it. My diabetes makes me so hungry, and oatmeal just doesn't cut it for breakfast. What is a very full and satisfying meal for breakfast that is diabetes friendly?
That's a wonderful question. First of all, congratulations on eating breakfast. We were talking about the diet composition and about a plant-based diet only, but another topic that's equally important for people with type 2 diabetes is meal timing and frequency. And you want to start your day with a big breakfast. So it sounds like you eat your oatmeal and you're still hungry. I have some good news for you. You can have another course. You can have your tofu scrambled, or your bean burrito, or a lentil soup, or whatever you like. You can have a really big breakfast. If you're on insulin, you will need to count your carbohydrates and dose your insulin, accordingly. If you're on oral medications only, then no consideration. Just eat as much as you need to be full, and it can be a several course meal if you like that. How many of you have heard anyone recommending several courses for people with diabetes? But hey, this applies for breakfast only. Okay. So get a big breakfast. If you can do a walk after each meal, extra points. One study that incorporated 15-minute walks after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they were able to cut their glycemic control, or their mean glucose throughout the day, by half, by just taking 15-minute walks after each meal. So have a big breakfast, ideally go for a walk, have a moderate lunch, and guess what? Now's the kicker. The kicker is coming now. Keep your dinner the lightest meal of the day. And if you want to get extra benefits, skip dinner completely. You can do it only once a week. You can do it, whatever you'd like, time to time. But if you learn to do it every single day, wow, you won't believe how much energy you will have and how much your diabetes will improve. And it's actually fairly simple. You know the proverb, eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, a dinner like a pauper. And guess what? We did some research that confirmed this ancient proverb. So this is my recommendation to you. Eat a big breakfast, eat a moderate lunch, and keep your dinner super light. And extra points if you can skip dinner completely. You will be looking forward to your breakfast the next day, and it'll be big, but that will actually improve your glycemic control as well.
Okay, Dr. Kahleova, this is absolutely fabulous, and I know that you have a 1 o'clock meeting, so I want to be very cognizant of your time. Kathy, if you would please share with the audience the thank you present we have for Dr. Kahleova. So truly, you have made us so special because I know how busy you are. And you talked about being calm, and we all know that lavender plays a big part of this. So we are sending you a silk sachet filled with lavender. It's in the heart shape, and you can put it in your pillow. You can put it in your bed with you so that you can smell that lavender, and you will have peaceful dreams. And you can think about the wonderful people at Chat and Chew and Poke Wellness Professionals, and how much we appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with us on type 2 diabetes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is so kind of you. It was my pleasure being with you. I hope you will do the homework and we'll do the plant-based diet now. I hope you will have a big breakfast and skip dinner at least time to time. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Okay, bye-bye. So everyone, we do have a few announcements. I know Dr. Kahleova has to leave. So Kathy, I think you have those announcements, don't you?
I do. And I'm going to share my screen to show them to you real quick. Next Zoom will be with Brian Hart. And also our next thing that will go up on the podcast page is an interview with one of the Mastering Diabetes food coaches that we had an opportunity to speak with. So if you don't know about our podcast, you need to check it out. And Kim, will you put up the link to our podcast? So if you're interested in a Health-i-monial, of that kind on our podcast, that's available for you. And then, of course, we put up the links earlier, I believe, for Jolene's to Health-i-monials, telling about her journey. And it's such an interesting one. That's why it took 2 videos to do it, because the first one's real short, but then something happened. So you got to find out what happened to her sore feet and how she handled it. Okay, so Debbie, I think you mentioned you have a class coming up.
Yes, I do. And I don't have it advertised yet, but I will have a Food for Life class. And for those people who are not familiar with Food for Life, it is a program through the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I am a Food for Life instructor, and the class will be on diabetes. It will be on November 21st, possibly November 28th. I have to really poll people to see if the week of Thanksgiving is a good week or wait until after Thanksgiving. But I wanted to really focus on foods that we could have for Thanksgiving. So anyway, that's going to be free, and it's going to be at 6 o'clock. And if you follow my website, it will be announced in the next couple of weeks. I also want to say something about Dr. Michael Greger. All of you know, or you should know, that he has a fabulous book coming out on December 5th. It's How Not to Age. And we at Polk Wellness Professionals and Chat and Chew will be hosting him here in Lakeland at 6 p.m. on January 5th. So this is not going to be a free event. It's going to have a small door charge, but more information will be coming out. So once again, if you follow our websites, you will get that information, and we look forward to seeing everybody there. Okay, that's all I have on my end.
Okay, and I just put the link, the email, if you want to get our email from Chat and Chew, which will have those events in it. And that's where you would send an email to say to join, because that keeps you up to date on everything that's happening. Last link is Ken put the one for our calendar for the year, so you can see the other speakers we're having coming up in meetings. And we just want to tell you all, thank you very much for coming.